Here.
Well, I didn't get one of those green sheets.
Okay. Come on up right there. You don't have to sit there with your hand raised like a you can come up.
Oh, and I'll also answer it since, I raised my hand.
Yeah.
Is it like preferring something?
Yeah. But it could be expressed as a preference of one thing over another. Anybody want to add to that idea? Go. So if you were writing about it, for instance, for the Press Citizen, and all of your facts about City High were very positive, and all of your statistics about West High were maybe more negative, that would be where your bias would be shown. Okay? You're still writing an article, it still has facts, you're still telling the truth, it's just the selective truth that represents and reinforces your bias for readers. Okay? So we're gonna go through to kind of better connect with these signposts that help us click into where well, why this way? Why is the author mentioning this? And that becomes kind of important and sort of interesting. So, extreme and absolute language. Well, what is this exactly? When the author chooses, by way of word choice or phrasing, to use language that doesn't promote any gray area, that is an all or nothing kind of idea, that exaggerates, or even leads you to assume that the limits of the truth might be a little bit pushed. Because there are very few things in this world that are always one thing or never another. We've got to be aware of that. So asking ourselves, well, why does the author say this like this, is pretty important. Are they selling a point of view? Or is it really true that always this is happening, or never this is happening? For instance, if a nonfiction author said, well, girls in science classrooms never get a fair shake. In some classrooms, that might be true. But never. So, for example, looking at the Annie Murphy Paul article that's been written for Psychology Today, a leading psychology magazine. She writes in this introductory paragraph, psychologists once believed that only bigoted people use stereotypes. Now the study of unconscious bias is revealing the unsettling truth. We all use stereotypes. All the time, without knowing it. We have met the enemy of equality, and the enemy is us.
Yeah.
The use of the word all, and the use of the word all is absolute. All is not the majority. All is not most. All is all. Absolute language. Extreme language comes in this word right here. It's not the problem of equality. It's not the misrepresentation of equality. It's the enemy. Guess what the enemy is? So, here's what you do, and here's how you annotate for these. Because just like with fiction signposts, like again and again, and figurative language. It's not enough just to label them. It's good to label them, but then really extending your annotation. Not into a paragraph. I'm looking for maybe 6, 7 words here. But how I mark this for extreme and absolute language, EAL. And then your annotation is actually the answer to this question. Why does the author say it like that? So answer this. Here's the introductory paragraph of this article. Psychologists once believed that only bigoted people use stereotypes. Now the study of unconscious bias is revealing the unsettling truth. We all use stereotypes all the time without knowing it. We have met the enemy of equality, and the enemy is us. Why does he have to say it like that? Write down your answer in the margin. Next one. Quoted words. It is essential that you understand that particularly when you are reading a newspaper article or a magazine article, the author of said article is not the expert. Yeah, they've done some research, but in journalism, your deadlines are quick. So they may have spent a couple of days, maybe a week, putting this article together, but they do not become the expert on the topic that they're writing about in such a short period of time. They study journalism or maybe English in college, not, in this case, psychology or neurology or cognitive behaviorism. So, when you see that an author calls on quotations from somebody else, you know that there was an interview conducted, okay? And that interview has been done, and therefore the words from another person are quoted because they have some authority on the issue. There's some expertise there because of continual study. Or maybe you don't have to go to school for it. If I'm reporting on a traffic accident, you don't have to be like the head of the Transportation Bureau to have an opinion. You could just have been trying to cross the street at the time of the accident, and therefore your expertise is your perspective being there at the scene. Okay? Regardless, when another person's words are borrowed and cited with the use of quotes or words or phrases like according to, that we know that the originator of that idea, the words that are being quoted, there's something that shows authority. So we've got to ask, well, why that person? What do they got? And are they credible? So when you're looking at your Annie Murphy Paul article, in the second paragraph here, it says, Mahzarin Banaji doesn't fit anybody's idea of racist. Well, then why are we talking to her? Oh, a psychology professor at Yale University, she studies stereotypes for a living. And as a woman and a member of a minority ethnic group, she has felt firsthand the sting of discrimination. Yet, when she took one of her own tests, I showed very strong prejudices, she says. It was truly an uncomfortable experience. So, in thinking about how this quote is used here, why does the author quote this person? Based on the definition, really she's got expertise in two ways. Write down your answer to this question. Why does the author quote this particular person? Why Mahzarin Banaji? And I label it first with a QW, so I know that I'm responding to quoted words. Next, we've got numbers and statistics. Okay. Numbers and statistics are used all the time in nonfiction because numbers are hard to argue with. Numbers in and of themselves are the most objective data that you can use to prove a point. What does it mean if something is objective? It's the opposite of subjective, if that helps. Is that the idea? Something that you can't argue with. Why? Factual. Why? Morgan?
It's not someone's opinion. Like, it would be like if someone did a study or counted the population, that would be objective data because someone's not making it up, being like, my opinion is that there are too many people in the world. Someone's being like, there are 8 billion people in the world.
Right. So, because, like, I look at numbers or data or something that is completely objective, being like the center line. Bias over on that extreme, bias over on that extreme, but the center line where there is no bias, that's where the numbers are. Okay, that's why we look at them and like truth. That's why, Louis, they're hard to argue with because they don't show any bias. So there's not opinions represented. Now, the use or which data points you choose to use can certainly show bias. Like back to Joe's example, if I use only the flowery positive data and statistics about City High, but then I only report on the suspension rates and the dropout rates at West High, my data is skewed, and therefore my bias shows. So when we are looking for, and when we should perk up is when we see a plain old number. Those are the easiest to spot, but sometimes they're word numbers. So for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, obviously, but a percentage, a ratio would be something like 2 to 1. Okay, some sort of rate that since 2017, the number has exponentially grown 4 times the rate of the growth in 2016. Okay. As opposed to the rate has skyrocketed. What does that mean? So, why does the author include this particular data? Something that we should think about. So when we're looking at this article here, we're talking about the study that Banaji uses. And here the Banaji's test presents the subject with a series of positive and negative adjectives, each paired with a characteristically white or black name. As the name and the word appear together on the computer screen, the person taking the test presses a key, indicating whether that word is bad or good. Did you take a test that was asking you to do a similar thing? one of your IATs that you took? Was that a thing? Okay. So here are the results of that data. Most people who participate in the experiment, even some African Americans, respond more quickly when a positive word is paired with a white name or a negative word with a black name. That is data, the results of an experiment. Something that should be like, what does most mean? Over 50%. Most is 51%, just as much as it is 99%. Is that word use here, most, is that as clear as Annie Murphy Paul could be in citing this particular study? Would I feel differently if 51% of people who participated in this experiment found this versus 86% of people who participated in this? Yeah, I probably would, but I'm not allowed that information. I'm not allowed that specificity, so I'm left with most. Now, why do you think that is? Answer this question off to the side. Why did the author include that data? Last but certainly not least, I've got contrasts and I've got contradictions. This is a signpost that relies on both because what you see when you see a contrast, you guys know this word, the opposite of to compare, to like things, you would contrast or you would explain the difference between two things that are dissimilar. But the flip side, what's a contradiction again? What does it mean to contradict? To challenge, to not necessarily neutralize, it's kind of the opposite of that. To debate, to disagree, to oppose. So if you contradict what your mom says in public, so contrasts and contradictions are when the author shows a difference between two things that are related to the topic. Okay? Where what you have known or been presented with earlier in the article, maybe now she draws a contrast and shows the dissimilarities between what she set up and something else. Another idea that she's about to write about. Or if she, like she will in the article, the example that we're going to look at, if she highlights a contradiction, she could cite two different researchers that disagree on a pretty important point. So we've got to ask ourselves, okay, well, what is the difference she's trying to show here? Or what's the change in what I have, the information I've been exposed to? And lastly, why does it matter? Deciding, like, essentially whose side to take in this disagreement. So down at the bottom of the page, the first page, she talks about how normal categorizing things actually is. Okay, so psychologists like Bernanke the simple but profound point that we all use categories of people, places, things to make sense of the world around us. Our ability to categorize and evaluate is an important part of human intelligence, said Spinozza. Without it, we couldn't survive. But stereotypes are too much of a good thing. In the course of stereotyping, a useful category, say women, gets loaded up with additional associations, usually negative ones. So here's a contrast. If I was to merely categorize you, I might say, and don't move anywhere, it's just an example, but I might say, okay, girls, you go over on this side of the room, boys, you go over on this side of the room, okay? I've just categorized. There's nothing harmful in that. When that categorization becomes a stereotype, I apply judgment to the two categories that I've made. So I could come over here and say, okay, girls, you guys are mature enough and sensitive enough to handle what I'm going to teach today. So I'm really going to pay attention to you because of your like innate feminine sensibilities. Understand deep material. Boys, here are some blocks. Try not to throw them at one another while I pay attention to the girls.
Thank you. Keep them hidden first.
Think about the stereotypes that I've applied here. Categorizing boys and girls, that's a normal way to go through the hallway. But it's when I associate where I lump judgments all together, like, oh, the girls over there, yes, there might be a couple that are more mature than others. There might be girls that are less sensitive than others. Boys on this side, I've categorized you, but then I put a value judgment on you saying that, well, all of you boys are probably tactile people, so here are some blocks to keep you occupied. And then try not to throw them at one another. I'm judging the fact that boys would be less mature than their female counterparts and that they may be aggressive in order to throw blocks as a natural inclination. Now, sure, there are boys in this room that would do everything I just said. But not all of them. Not all of them. It's a pretty apt example, not the one that I used in 6th grade because this one fits so much better. So here's a contrast. Contrasting categories and drawing the dissimilarity between categories and stereotypes. So it gets even more involved when we add this contradiction down at the top of the next page. Though a small minority of scientists argues that stereotypes are usually accurate, most disagree. So then, why this? What's the difference between these scientists, and why does it matter? Why does it matter that most people, most scientists disagree with the scientific findings of some that argue that stereotypes are true? What does that say about stereotypes? What does that say about Paul's bias? Answer the question in the margin. Where are we down then? We're at the 80. All right. What's the difference or change, and why does it matter? What's the difference between categories and stereotypes? Why does it matter? Or what's the change between some scientists that believe that stereotypes are true and then the distinction that most disagree? Why does it matter? Now, the last step here is this, and my intention was to have you partner up for this activity. We don't have a whole lot of time to do that, but other classes did. And you're going to read a version of Yolanda Young's article about implicit biases in school, okay? The light pink version is written at a 9th grade level with the help of Newsella, okay? That's important to know, okay? The dark pink or salmon colored version is the way the article originally appeared in the Guardian newspaper. Okay, so it's written at an adult level. Not entirely different, just slightly scaffolded. So, 9 honors kids, you're absolutely grabbing the salmon color, but the rest of you have a choice about what's the most appropriate level of challenge. You'll also notice that the light pink version has some what are called scaffolds, where I kind of point you in the direction to at least a couple of the signposts that I want you to notice. But I don't make any scaffolds, I don't make any marks that would point to where you should be surprised, where you should be potentially confused, or where the author assumes that you know something that you don't, or where it's changing, challenging, or confirming what you already know. Okay? By the time you walk in tomorrow, you're going to read and have annotated not only for one of each of the stance questions, but also looking to find examples or evidence of each one of the signposts. And the one that gets a little bit tricky is extreme and absolute language, but it can be done. So I wanted you to get a start with this in pairs, pairing yourself with someone who has chosen the same article as you. And maybe we can get through like maybe the first page or the first couple of paragraphs. But I have piles on both sides. Remember, light pink is 9th grade reading level. Dark pink is the original text. So grab yourself an article. Everyone needs one. And I will be coming around and checking annotations for these at the start of class tomorrow. I've got articles on both sides of the room just so there's not a bottleneck.
Pardon this brief interruption, but Culinary Club has been canceled for today.
Why is that? No, I think I need to know.
Yes, right there.
You have the. That's the sign. Father's Day.
I already have.
But you're right about the importance of belonging. So in your own pager, write that literary analysis. Hey guys, can you take a seat, please? Goodbye. So, I see how it works. Okay, you're literally not this.
Bye.
Bye.
It's literally a fucking picture. You should
There's literally anyone laughing.
Me out like the,
Bye, Miss Brazil.
Bye. The assignment sheet here says, don't summarize the book, which it looks like, but
Class
you
is
don't need to
over.
review the book either. At least
I know you
it's assignment, I
still
don't care what
tired.
you're enjoying.
College.
Take up space. What I want you to make sense of is like, this is how they feel accountable to other people, or that they don't feel accountable to other people. And this is what happens when that's true for them, when they don't feel any connection, or when they do find connection. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? So I don't even think, okay, so this, the real world catches up with you. That is your second one picture. And your creative one pager. Show you some examples in this too. But this is where you can choose that for a prompt. But like this says,
Well, can this be my second one page?
well,
Then I can
it's
just-
not matching all the requirements. So for instance, your one pager should be presented using a piece of white copy paper, one side only. And I would need the title and author. Okay, good. the theme, yes, your personal response, which this could work for, quotes or excerpts that would relate to the theme that you chose, but I'm missing visual images here.
Let's see.
And maybe a question, visual images and a question, ask an open-ended discussion style question about the theme and thoroughly answer it by citing evidence from the text. So I'll show you some examples of what other kids have turned into here.
I can get some pictures.
Yeah, or draw some pictures. Yeah, that's totally fine. And that, once I saw what you were kind of working with,
What would
you
this,
don't have to scrap
what would
maybe
this,
any of those ideas.
what would this be
What do you mean?
for the second one page? What would that grade be?
Well, so let's just call this like maybe the collection of your ideas. And now, like looking at some examples of what other kids did. Like you can totally print off images. Okay? That's kind of what I'm looking for. Does that make sense? So the visuals, he lost credit just because it's on. Okay? So, take that, and I've got white paper on top of my white box over there. Take that, and then tomorrow, during maybe your open third, you could borrow colors to take up either to Doug's room or you could work in here.
Okay.
Okay? We'll get that done, that's good. And then you feel better about like taking and writing about the belonging idea?
Mhm.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
that's the 2 paragraphs, and this is the more creative version. Take that paper, I wanna see something, I wanna see you work on this tonight.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good work.
Okay. So what time do we need to be here? 3:50? Just kidding. All right, I'll be here in a couple minutes. Is it just you, me, and Michael, or
Yeah, I think so.
did Jen leave?
She went over to Northwest.
Oh, that's from Rachel. Okay.
putting any more qualifiers on it. I get to drive it different.
Thanks, guys. For 15 minutes. Exactly. Right.
Cool.
Okay.
What are your kids doing for graduation? Or they already did it?
Hell knows. No, they didn't, I mean, I've had them do a short persuasive thing earlier, but
You have your kids do all of the stuff.
no, just, totally out of order and not in any like huge way, just feels like it should be time to have you write about an opinion about something. So for this, it's not for the persuasion thing, but I had them choose independent books off a list with the help of our librarians, our fine, wonderful librarians, for to read a third book of the term that was multiple perspectives and with a social issue in the background.
Okay.
Or in the foreground in some cases.
And so they chose
They
those
chose those independently, they're reading them alone.
that we had plenty of copies of,
Well,
or
no,
that some
we
of them
actually
needed
ordered a
to.
few things that we didn't have, some of them were things we had. We got that one about 9/11.
Oh, okay.
What's it called? You were the one who told me about it. I don't remember what it's called.
There were a couple of them that I was
Yeah.
looking at.
We got one copy at least of the one,
Did anyone read it?
it's Mia's reading it, so we'll be able to find out at least one
You guys-
person's view on it. Here, I will lift this up. Hello.
Thanks for doing that.
De-germ the
Well, I just like
surfaces.
typically, I do it in the middle of the day so that I can like get on, like. You would like it, but it's something.
I told you in my first year of teaching at Kennedy, I had a colleague who went around to every desk between every class and Lysol every desk, every hour. I mean, I taught in his room 1 hour, and yeah. Did a short code. So I was just saying, my kids, after we did Book of Unknown Americans, and then we did All American Boys, I had them pick independent books that had multiple perspectives and a social issue. They were supposed to, I did an example presentation for them.
So weird. I'm really sorry.
No apologies.
And they're supposed to do research on that issue and connect it to what the author was trying to do with these multiple perspectives. How is the author using the multiple perspectives to explore the issue? What aspects of the issue are being explored? Why does it matter? How good of a job does the author do of actually getting at real important stuff? I did an example presentation on All American Boys after they had finished reading it between two things. They're doing those presentations next week. There's theoretically persuasion in that if I'm asking them to evaluate how the author is doing in addressing the social issue.
Because you're making an
I'm not
argument,
sure.
like, to back it up in text.
Right. I'm not sure.
But that's where I've done research, because I've been very, very, very confused. Trying to discern just straight up argumentation from like persuasion. And I was working with the assumption that like, okay, we'll just use persuasive techniques in this. But like Meg and I were working on this, and she said something that I thought was particularly enlightening, that like the difference is when you really like stress, when kids must stress the audience involved so that, and then we talked about a couple of examples. like she was reading an editorial in the Press Citizen that Henry Harper just wrote. And I can't use the classes I got read.
What'd you say the last part?
I got Henry said right in class, so I can't use it as an example, but like, here's this editorial that like, he clearly has ethos, but like, just having like. exposition
Jaden
background-
Freeman, if you're in the building, could you please come to the main office? Jaden Freeman, you need to report to the main office.
And a point of view doesn't mean it's persuasive, like, like Meg was saying, the problem was that, you know, he did not play to his audience, which is,
Was that Henry did?
yeah, like in this editorial, that, so, you know, like, whereas he might have been seeking a call to action, or he might have been like, looking for help in solving the problem, like, it came off as a passionate rant, which is opinion, and can be well written, but it's not persuasive.
Right. So I think by that definition, what I'm doing right now is probably not adequately persuasive.
But it's certainly argumentation. They're
Yes,
making an argument.
yes.
Okay, so what I'm doing with argumentation is,
And that's the other thing, that we've decided, I guess, as a department, that we're doing persuasion, but there's nothing in the core that says we have to do persuasion. It's all about argumentation, so we're not tied to that.
okay, so we did the paper on, Old Man and the Sea, right? And then we just finished, Catcher in the Rye, and so now what they're doing is, they're doing research on a teen-related issue. So I took SIRS and I broke down the topics, and then they are relying on that. But then Daphne also came in and talked to them about setting up Noodle, which is kind of a little bit superfluous because there's all those citations already on SIRS, but part of the information that they want to use or will need to use isn't covered by citation. Anyway, they're working on persuasive argumentative speeches. So, yeah. So we'll have done a couple things and done some research. I gotta tell you though, you guys, and I don't mean to be condescending or anything like that, but I have a lot of little cherubs that, like, I have to take them by the hand and spoon feed them and put training wheels on their bicycles and everything.
Yeah.
And I mean, it just, the level, you know what I'm saying? Then there's some that are really capable, but anyway.
Yeah, I don't know, like, I find that is really true. Certainly work completion, but like, just discussion. We just finished a book that like, the majority of them found very engaging, and I know they did.
Which one was that?
Yeah, but
Okay.
and then, so like, I finished reading the epilogue where these characters are now, and like, you know, what his big takeaway has been since the publication of the book, and then just ask them like, so what do you think? Like, tell me what you think. And I'm asking that as broadly as possible because you can, like, what do you think about this?
Mhm.
It could be something that the beginning of the book, but you're frank, like,
Yes. I too, with a great many line, yes. I always feel first thing in the morning like it's more will than skill, but I can't prove that.
well, and I graded them.
Yeah.
Like, if they wrote a thought-provoking discussion question, they got a C minus, but then if I never heard their voice, then we had to discuss.
Yeah.
Hey, can I go off on two tangents before I forget? I really apologize. I emailed Bacon and I asked him for money to get some of those books for Winter's Mom.
Oh, good.
He said yes.
Included it on that thing about spending the money? Yeah, that's great. I got a class set of challenge review for 10th grade because of the thing we were talking about that one. They had connected to Smart Routes 5 and then just said yes to that too, so.
And then another thing I wanted to make sure I told you before I forgot was that, Elise Lucina, she's become a booger, and then when she's gonna be dropped. Well, she's in her first trimester too. She's a redshirt senior.
She's taking mine.
It was like,
She's taking this like that? She must have found one turn or two turn. Is she in both fall and?
no, just in a, right now.
She was on my roster, but then she disappeared before I. She was, they tried to put her in my co-top, that's what it was. And I'm like.
Yeah.
All right.
It's
we're
okay.
She's,
29 in our co-top class. Yeah.
right, she's right now barely hanging on by a thread in, say, right, she's already scheduled for my, her contemporary lit next term.
Well, I know she likes you, so that's good. But, like, I have her,
I wish she would.
I have her fourth period, but, I mean, her attitude was poo, and she'd come into class late, or she'd skip a lot. She skipped the test when she already was like at a D, so because she skipped, I'm not letting her make it up, so she's at an F, and she won't really get herself out of the basement.
I'm not saying this in her defense at all.
Yeah.
But she is definitely somebody who, like, takes a lot of time to build up goodwill, I suppose. Like, you have to, for her, I feel like you really got to, it's not only her, you have to, like, build a relationship over a long time. You want to be like, you really can't really do that. Like, you can't actually blow things off in the first 2/3 of the year and then decide, like, okay, now I'm going to start trying.
Yeah.
Now I'm gonna start trying because now I like you well enough to,
Yeah.
that is really not going to work out in turn, it's
Well,
not a strategy.
Especially when you have, like, I had so many other cats I was trying to herd that period. Like, I can't even tell you how many houses I went to in that class.
Yeah.
Because there's so many naughty kids, I got,
Yeah.
like, I can't do this for you, Elise, you are a red shirt.
Yeah.
So,
Good on you.
pull up your pants or
Or
do it online.
Go find a different way to do it, yeah. Yeah, that's too bad. But it's, she's not careful, it'll do the same story next year, right? And obviously, if she's retaking with you, she knows, I may like you, it's not doing favors to get you across the stage, you gotta.
Yeah, I feel like that, if you fail enough, I mean, like, she would just automatically go to online.
She should have, I don't know why they're doing that. We have that online course, we have that guy upstairs, we have that room upstairs, I mean, I don't know why the kids aren't doing that. Classes are so big. So, we need to just be a little bit more direct, I suppose.
By the way, did we talk ever about no writing after I had the conversation with the person? Was that in our group that we were talking about no writing?
Yeah.
You started it,
Yeah.
you were gonna ask.
So I had a
Confidence
phone
cost.
conversation about it, and, boy, is that expensive. It is. Trying to remember now, I think it was, okay, here's what it was. Minimum of 200 kids, $10 a kid.
Whoa.
Just for that.
And that doesn't include the writing stuff, which is where they can actually like plug their papers in and do stuff with it in there. And that is an extra 1,000 on top of a minimum of 2,000 just to get the other stuff. So I was like, okay, well, I will talk about it with my colleagues. We do not need to schedule another phone conversation. I do wish we had more. I mean, I'm still using it with my essay writing people, and they kind of bitch about it, but when they actually do practice, then effective, and just giving them an understanding of something. I could do a better job of organizing which thing you're doing when. I certainly could do a better job of tailoring, like, you need this, so I'm going to have you do this one. I'm just not good enough yet to be able to say, so mine is, everybody this week is doing this practice and then taking points on that at the end of the week. And next week is next week I broke it into two and said, well, these people have done really well on the quizzes. I'm gonna give them a bit sophisticated thing than kids who have been struggling with them, and then for them, just having to do like a commonly confused words kind of thing. Even that, I feel like is going through. So I kind of like it, but it's ridiculous, stupid expensive. So I don't see it ever happening.
Well, and I just always, I thought it's interesting that we don't have, like when we talk about common assessment or the push to do cohorts in our content area, lack of resources or teaching style aside, like the most common objective thing that we could be pushing is leveling convention mechanics instruction by grade level. Like, that's common. And that's stuff that's easily reteachable in like a pull-out kind of advisory scenario. And
I know this is different because I'm talking about seniors in essay writing. Do you feel like even with ninth graders that there's enough consistency of what they know and don't know? This is what the no writing stuff ought to make available is, with them taking a pre-test or whatever they call it on there, and figuring out what they don't know, how to do it, and then tailoring it specifically to the individual kid. I just don't know how you do that in a systematic way without a system like that, in a way that's not going to be good old fashioned.
Well, and so like Jill Herrick uses a combination of like Khan Academy and Ed Puzzle in her math class over at Tate.
Who does that?
Jill Herrick, I presented Power School, Power Teacher Pro.
Oh, okay.
And she'll essentially give them the quiz first, like for the week. If they pass out of it, then they move on to the next unit. And then like at Tate, it's been so useful, and she's got the paid version of it. It's been really useful for her because of absenteeism and all that stuff. But it is like, Jack, okay, like circling back to it, like, are you still proficient in this? If like they run out of things to do.
Right.
But then, like based on the pre-test, maybe she creates her own pre-tests for it based on the materials that they'll learn in the lessons they'll go through. Like there's like notes and like each lesson or each, unit, I guess, is designed to be like 7 days long or something. It's been a while since I thought about it, but like I thought it would be like the perfect application for a conventions, like good old fashioned.
Does Ed Puzzle have, I don't know Ed Puzzle. I know you.
Ed Puzzle has, Ed Puzzle is basically like you screencast like your own lesson.
thing.
Like there are other things that are useful maybe on there, not really for language, it's all like very good stuff. But then you can stop your own lesson and like punctuate it with questions that they have to answer.
Make any video your lesson. Is it free?
Maybe I
Yeah, they're the free.
were actually showing you this. Now I feel like I know it would be, let's put the question in.
Yeah, I mean, like, you could use it for any, like, YouTube or
Yeah.
TED Talk, like,
Oh my gosh, this is awesome.
Ally presented on it one day, I think, last year that I went to it. It was in amongst a bunch of other, like, there are several test things. Khan Academy stuff, I was always kind of skeptical of, and then this year, Jack over at Southeast has it for, who is it, Skag? And, you know, again, we'll just, yeah, we'll just bracket that, the conversation about him. But he got himself way behind in the Khan Academy stuff, so in order to keep up, I had to really sit with him for a long time and figure out how thing worked. And it's really good.
yeah, it is.
It's brilliant.
Yeah,
The
the
way
Khan-
that it
Khan
forces them to, yes.
My friend Mindy uses them over at Lucas.
I mean, the way that it scaffolds for them, the way that it uses mastery challenges, even the way that it incorporates animation stuff when they get a thing right, not in a big cheesy way that would piss off a, you know, junior high kid, but it is a little tiny cookie that makes you feel like, okay, did a thing. And since I've been working with him more one-on-one with it and like really sat with him, I've learned a great deal more about seventh grade math that I had forgotten 3 years ago. But, like, I'm really impressed. It made me more want, you know, something like it through the never ending stuff for us because of how, like, it's the one thing with our subject area where you feel like, yeah, that should be how learning conventions, all kinds of conventions should be for us.
But I mean, like, that could be even, because I look at US Lit, or like when we had all the juniors, as like your last best chance. So, and these kids are a good worksheet. They're not,
You know, I've, like my fourth grade class, I have to use worksheets or assignment sheets or class
Yeah.
sheets or whatever, just to keep them focused and it's the way to herd the cats, man.
and they take them seriously.
They do, what's up with that?
But that, I mean, like, even that, it sounds so simplistic and there's no way to gauge with assessment data or whatever, but, or at least I was assessment data. But, you know, I think that would be, instead of, gosh, I guess, 10 cohort meetings, like blue up,
Oh, no, why?
just sort of dissension and, well, just how it's supposed to be, like, they're supposed to be doing common assessments and they're not common. And maybe the co-talk class is like the reason why they can't keep aligned, I guess, across the board, but, they were discussing like an analytical writing rubric where the proficiency measure on the rubric was that can a kid retell the text and not analyze, and
That's proficient?
somebody made the case that, like, well, that's
Proficient?
not proficient.
It's not proficient, I would think. Well,
Like, well, but then, yeah, I mean, like, is it developmentally appropriate for us to be able to, like, actually certify that all ninth graders can actually analyze them? Yeah,
just a different level of things, right?
or give them enough scaffolds that they fall into it by accident, maybe, not that maybe they can't create it on their own, but you can't call something proficient that is inherently showing a lack of proficiency in an analysis, but what's the point?
Yeah.
Like, why would you do that? I brought that point up and it was like,
So you've been, do you go to 2 full board meetings now?
and he goes to both, right?
She's crazy.
She like 9 and 10.
And I really appreciated Ally this week, like, she's going to bat for me. But like, I just don't understand things that she does sometimes, and
That Ellie does, or?
and she's the arbiter of the destiny of what we do with her one section. Like, to me, if maybe we should defer to the gals who have 3 sections of this and see
Yeah.
the majority, and like, let's talk about what's plausible. But then again, I mean, like, so she's making choices or pushing choices that, like, of course you can take 3 different formative research paragraphs and get them back and like bring all of that. That's 96 times 3 for me. That ain't happening. So it's just sort of like, well, why? Like, what is common? Like, why?
Well, I'm glad you guys are picking to work with, so.
Likewise.
Um,
Partially, I'm looking at that because I'm apparently doing close enough to the line of, like, I should have been doing something, I should have made this current project more argumentative than what I feel like maybe.
well,
So-
no, I mean, I was having a really hard time because last year, for instance, my first assignment, I like maybe overshot, but after Unknown Americans and the Immigration Lit Circle unit, I had them write an editorial about immigration in America and how it was being mediated, essentially, for the impressions you get online and on television. And like, just didn't anticipate the lack of knowledge that they had, or the need really to like make that assignment worthwhile, the need for them to at least have kind of like a bank of researched, you know, paragraphs or quotes from experts or something. So that was like supposed to be my argumentation, and it was bad. And then I did an advertisement I threw together with Persuasion last year, but it wouldn't have applied. And there's this like really excellent setup here with Wes Moore saying like, it's not so much like a nature versus nurture idea, but he asked the imprisoned guy, do you feel like we're products of our environment? He's like, no, I think we're products of our expectations, and the way we internalize the expectations put on us. People expect people to go to college, or go to college, people expect to go to jail, or go to jail. And so then, talking to Meg, I was like, I think I'll just like have them argue that. And she's like, but that's argumentation. I agree. Like, what am I supposed to do? So that's when she brought up like the whole audience thing. And the, my biggest takeaways are not gonna be like last year, not gonna be the persuasive devices so much as just like, they're all gonna write letters and how they've seen the impact of expectations in their own adolescence, I guess. So like, do you feel like your success is suffering or stagnant because of the low expectations people have had of you? Do you feel like you're meeting expectations and therefore like could provide like kind of a pep talk letter to so I'm kind of grafting it a little bit. Or do you feel like you're the product of really high expectations and then the downfall of that is that's made you incredibly stressed out and anxious?
This sounds kind of like, I'm not reading that book for the in-service, but from what I understand, is that part of that listening to what is it?
Yeah.
Right.
With all the
We-
stereotype
yeah,
stuff,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's certainly related.
Yeah.
It seems like there would be a shortened version of that would be really interesting to get the rest more, which I still have to read. There's a really cool lecture that I don't know that they would be able to sustain attention for because it's a 40-minute thing, but it has some really cool stuff in it about, what they've been able to show you can do with it. Like the research, I think would be interesting. The idea that if you say to a group of white men that are successful on standardized math tests, that the purpose of the test is to compare them to Asian men, that their scores go down. Would be all over talking about that. There's obviously, so I used a little bit of stereotype threat stuff with my Martin Luther King Day or that Friday before with US Lit because I felt like it really fits with talking about all the boys that were reading. I was glad that we did it, but I also felt like there's a whole obvious huge landmine that I had not really considered. And it establishes that when you ask students, some of them are not used to talking in sophisticated, sensitive ways about stereotypes about different groups of people. That could go really terribly fucking wrong. And so it didn't, but I did feel like maybe there were some kids who were a little bit weirded out by the fact that they were being asked to at least consider what negative stereotypes were about them. And, so I was like, okay, well, that was something that I wish that I had done. Thankfully, I didn't have to do it 1 hour, and it was first thing of the day, and then it was on to other stuff in other classes. But
Like formative research for the nonfiction reading exposure for ninth graders, I use like 4 implicit bias articles. And there are really good, really short snips of research analysis that like engaging research analysis. And so, yeah, it's a similar thing, and at least we get to like back it up. And I have to stress all the time, it's like, these articles call on race a lot because that's like a thing you can see. And a differentiation that is like maybe most divisive. But like understanding implicit bias is really having to do with But yeah, I give them like how the article that they're reading today is about like bias of teachers in school.
Yeah.
Are you doing that implicit bias training again?
I got left off the list.
They say a cool thing in one of these lectures by the wisdom quality author, which was he's telling his audience like junior high, love strategies, love it, because first time, it's like an introduction to sociology. Like it's the first time that there's been a theory that they can understand that where they can feel like they understand why different groups of people do what they do, even though they're like, you know, mostly that's it for just accurate or generalizing or whatever. They love them for this reason. So this is interesting. High school students, I mean, high school students at that level. Too, that it's just not a way that I thought of. You surely, having worked with junior high kids, have noted this before, right? No.
Well, it's just like wild reinvention. And like when they reinvent, they go as categorically shift-tastic as, you know, like when a junior high girl flips the switch and decides like, I'm dyeing my hair, which also means I must now wear black lipstick. And also, I need to get out of the kids' home to get myself. Because they all go together.
Right.
And if I only dye my hair, I haven't really fully lifestyle.
Yeah.
I'm out.
Right.
So, yeah. And just like how they align themselves with like what they wear.
Mhm.
But,
Hello.
Hi, I just, picture wall, it's painted, that's all.
thank
Thank you.
That's what you guys are thinking about doing third trimester, like what? I mean, I'm gonna do my research for a unit and then. Otherwise, more.
The things they carry, it's structure to do the narrative, it's not,
That's what I typically do, but
the narrative, I think, is their term, right?
Yeah.
And that's the one we got to get
Yeah.
to. Otherwise, more, I would think, there's stuff that you need. I'm gonna walk across the hall and figure that out right now, because when we talked about the play that you have there, that's not 30 copies.
yeah, it is.
That's 30 copies. It's a thin little-
is that 6 degrees of separation?
Yes.
Is that the play you get through?
I'm gonna do,
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna do
I'm doing that
both
and fences.
this and, yeah, when are you doing fences? Because I was gonna go do this and then into Gatsby and then I wanted to do fences and salesmen together.
And I think we're doing all the same texts, just rearranged from each other, because I think I'm ending with Gatsby. Last year, I used Salesman with Fences. I might again, not probably to read it, because we don't have copies to it.
Of what?
Fences 7. Oh. Yeah, that's read it one with.
No, I gave my kids choices and they all picked fences.
Oh, sure.
I was flabbergasted.
Oh, I have no doubt with the movie last year, people heard about Oscar nominations. And
Well, I showed them a clip from all the different play choices and I would let them vote on Google Forms and either Fences was their first or second choice. It was cray.
I feel like I was gonna start with that and then do, I don't remember. I definitely wanna make a connection between that and Gatsby with the like reinvention of the self thing. But let me go look and see what I've got.
Well, and it's really, this wouldn't be the worst thing to photocopy, at least for this year, like if we both like it.
Is it online? Do we Chromebook?
hey, if we need 5 or 10 more copies of that, do you want to send a thing to Ally who said that there's a little bit of money that if we need a few books of the whatever? You could say that isn't too expensive if we only need 5 because we somehow only had 30 instead of 35. Is this supposed to be locked? I think I don't even know why I inserted my key into the door. I just walked over and locked it and then walked back to the
Like to
conversation.
be safe.
Yeah.
Do you have a phone charger? My car.
Oh, no. You okay?
I broke the new.
So Robin, do you think that's like a plausible? I think that, I mean, expectations, I was gonna front load it, where I've been primarily inspired by the idea that in ILT, we're doing all of this talking about like, well, ILT and thinking it's about all the programming and all of the, conversation to get, it's connected and to like essentially like help them avoid failure. But is that like catching them as they fall versus like, are we boosting you? Are we doing enough to boost you? So my,
It's what? I think it's the last one. Second one.
that we're boosting them for.
And when you say them, are you referring to?
That's some bad news from our account. Or were you already aware of what we scheduled to use? You have Gatsby for the first 5 weeks of their term.
Well, that's okay, because I was gonna do this
Now.
now.
Oh, okay, well, that works out great then. I was supposed to have already done that, which I can't do. So I'm gonna find a place for it here. But I'm supposed to start with Death of the Salesman first 2 weeks. Then Fences, so that'll be like the 2 weeks before spring break. Can't be right, do we only have 2 weeks before spring break? I was thinking
Yeah.
3.
No, because break starts the 9th.
Right, well then, Death of the Salesman the first 2 weeks.
You know what, Michael, we don't even have full, we don't even have
That's
full.
right, because March 1st and 2nd, it's actually only
Thursday,
a
Friday.
total of 7 days.
Mhm.
Death of the Salesman will be fine for that then, because
Fences we find.
Fences I have the following 2 weeks after spring break. And then I start Gatsby, I have it for 5 weeks. And then it's May, so I'll put 6 degrees. Post Gatsby. That works okay
Wait, can I
for
ask,
everybody else. Yeah.
what do you guys think about things like your,
I have never taught, I've taught a couple of stories out of it.
I don't do it at all.
Yeah, you use lessons from it, right?
Yeah,
It's
but,
like-
I mean, quite a few of them,
Mhm.
but,
I, quite frankly, don't think it's culturally, like, pervasive enough to push US Lit kids through. I think it's a really interesting, like, literary,
I need a
Read.
tow truck, my car is at work.
But
It's really dead. I already tried to get it
I-
started and, didn't help at all.
I
So
probably
we're
would
getting
choose
it if
to
I can
use
get
it
towed there, then you don't gotta.
because, like, I shove them through Gatsby because I feel like Gatsby's everywhere.
You know what, maybe this is where I let them,
Often.
let them do. Of course, I gotta think about this.
Like, in terms of war stories, I think it would be more important to give them, and we don't have this, but like, well, to give them something more contemporary. Because like when we deal with like contemporary warfare or like the PTSD issues for people coming back or the failure to take care of, you know, like
Honda Accord
maybe just pulling it out of the historical context, because I guess where I've always fallen for this particular population of kids is that like, if I do my job with something that is relevant and contemporary, then maybe they'll want to dig into the lead up or the history, that they would be more apt to read
Iowa City, Iowa.
like, because we read this and it references Native Son and it references Black Boy and it references like the Colin Powell memoir, that maybe they'd be more apt to read that because I do a good job at something that like is current and accessible. That, yeah, which is like, I want to teach literature. Okay.
Dave Segal told me.
All right, I'm gonna think about that.
But you could I'm like, I think it could be really interesting to pull like vignettes from a bunch of different war stories.
Yeah, one thing I did with Things They Carried, I thought it was like tied in protest music. And every day, we would go over a different story, I'd find a different song that had that theme. It was kind of fun to do that.
Maiden Lane. Also, I was.
When are we supposed to do the narrative by?
Dave Segal.
Because now I'm wondering if,
Could you tell me when I am supposed to do
yeah,
Things They Carried?
it's blank the first 2 weeks, and it's things they carry from right after spring break to 3 weeks.
Okay.
That's through April 6th. It looks like Jen is gonna pick up the things they carry after that point for 4 weeks.
Okay.
From April 9th to May 4th. And then you have Our America listed from April 23rd to May 25th. Because I don't know how to ask them to write and revise a narrative in the middle, like while they're reading Gatsby. I was just assuming that I would do that annotation that I was doing last year. But I mean, I already did it.
No.
And of that. Sure, that would take my own time. So I'm gonna skip doing that, try to replace it with some.
All right, thank you so much.
That's a good question. Why is that?
Okay, so maybe this isn't gonna work, but I had. So we're not gonna, like, I need 2 days for 2 days and next week, and then it's their try. So I won't do the persuasion. I hate
with the,
Borrowing books and scheduling. It's not the way over, and I understand it, I'm not proposing a change, it is. It doesn't function this way at
I'd be
all.
real curious to do math and see on after we learn
Hi, I just need to,
how much.
I have my car is getting to work in.
How students check out on. So we learn. They have,
It's,
so I
seems like
haven't
the
used
best
free
way
stuff,
to
so I've
do
done
that,
it 10 grade over this year.
but it makes
That's how much
no,
we're
there's no
getting
lights,
here.
no down.
We did like Antigone that way.
And I
We
tried
did
already starting to
like
look
doing
at
that.
it. And
But-
then after that, I broke.
In 10th grade, we probably would, we were using it in class. We did use it with in a little, not, things like that on hard copy. But with
I was
stuff
doing
that's
hear
not
that
on
the other day.
Yeah,
So many of them were on.
yeah.
it's just, it's the, yeah, the cover that's supposed to snap on.
Right, we, and, I feel like I sent someone a question about how about that software, so that they can monitor what students are doing. And, have you ever answered that question for me? But we need such software. Much more project.
Wait, could you,
That's what I was gonna say. I can
could
push
you
back.
push 6 degrees up here and then push back Gatsby?
Sure.
But then you'd be in the middle. Unless you do 6 degrees, like,
Unless what if I started the term 6 degree separation?
Yeah.
Although I would like to read it or watch it before I commit to this. I just wanna know, well, because of what I was about to say next, which is what I could do, since this is also a story about reinvention and like faking identity and so on. To then, so to do this, forward, go to break, come back, work on narrative thing, get to be determined, then do Gatsby. So I would be taking out fences and salesmen from there. And doing Gatsby a little later and making room for a narrative thing. And I'm only one class set up, and it's not even this, it's a.
right, we could
I
be
think
sharing
we could be
these,
doing it at
like
the same
that's
time, doesn't
totally.
it?
totally-
Well, this and Gatsby.
Guys,
Well, there's already in.
is there any flexibility, like if, I decide to do 6 degrees of separation, I can?
I'm sure.
Where would you see
We're
this?
sort of discussing right now. moving-
So if we,
Is it
so
on,
it doesn't matter when you do it. It matters when Robin does it. So if I
I would
think
work
I
around
can
you guys.
still be, if you were to do it before break and then push everything back, because nobody else wants Gatsby. And what I'm trying to buy is like,
A little time for,
you guys saw the play, it's online. Plays
okay,
71 pages. Yep, it's online.
so I have like 2 days marked for Baltimore Rising next week. And then I was thinking like, rolling out the letter over 3 days. I don't think I have much change in class period, so I could start the last 2 days of the trimester if I needed to rush. It's only a 3.
so then you would do this
I would do this and start it here. Probably just
That's
cover it
end
that
of
4
this term.
days.
And then do what, right, at the beginning of?
Yes.
So just 6
I also,
degrees here,
kind of broke the cover too.
and then something 6 degrees, and then probably start Gatsby. End of this week, early that week. So that would buy you 2 weeks with 6 degrees if you were to move it up.
6 degrees there,
And push Gatsby.
and push Gatsby down 2 weeks.
Right.
Does that give you enough for Gatsby? Why push it down 2 weeks? Oh, again, we probably
So
do it at the same time, but if you've got.
Christina's in the middle of the meeting.
Good. Sure.
Alex.
I'm not worried about Gatsby at all.
You're just worried about,
There are so many houses in Gatsby
which thing are you worried about? This,
that does, but
but actually.
won't be.
Which is-
Christina's said it's for her, but I don't think for her.
Okay. So,
I was just thinking on the phone this weekend. So I don't need to.
Yeah, you should take one of these home tonight and read it real fast, and then we can talk about what we'll do with it.
yeah. You know, any legal defenses.
It's a good one then.
Yeah.
Especially if you use the movie.
Oh, I'll be using it. Oh, I never read it.
Yeah, there's no real reason I need to show this.
Okay, so if you then want to write yourself in, do you not even want to write yourself in for 6 degrees because you're gonna use the online or?
No, I would like to write myself in, but I'm just saying it as a backup if I need to.
Yeah,
And we like 30 copies?
yeah.
Okay. Did we, well, could we send a note to Ally asking for a couple extra copies? I just did, okay. So this is the whole 3rd trimester. Maybe something you'll take.
I think a couple weeks for play
All right.
at most.
If I put myself for,
Right. I think too,
You know, in terms of time, the timing of it.
Yeah.
Like normally, I would probably like
I tried being as fun.
flip flop, like scene and then watch the scene. Did you maybe I'll just plow through the place.
Or did I
Let's
say-
see at this trimester or something.
okay, all right, so I didn't interfere with that. Continue. All right. Well, I'm gonna go.
Yeah, I can.
Thanks, you guys. It
Yeah.
feels really good and non-threatening to work with you and bottom line is on you guys.
Yes. indeed.
So, thanks a lot. If you like to, Brittany,
Yeah.
Totally fine. It's a 20-year-old car. I did this last week. There's something else horribly wrong happened. You fix it. And
very good attitude.
I've got insurance. I've got a roommate who's gonna come pick me up.
All right, see you guys later.
Bye.
So what do you do, like, what do you do in terms of like accountability piece? And or you should share your,
I usually have some kind of graphic organizer thing I'm doing with characters and motivations and things. But, I mean, not much outside of the usual, like, the online discussion stuff, some. You know, a lot of times what I do with plays is we are watching it while we are reading it. I tend not to ask students to, we are just going to read this play we usually read along while we are watching. If it's a good adaptation, it's pretty faithful. And that's what I do with fences. I just think it's so much better to be able to, than kids who otherwise don't have a good way in to being able to participate in class discussion, because they're sort of following but not really, either, again, will or skill. But I'd rather have them be able to have the excitement of participating in the conversation about something like fences, where they have opinions if they're watching, and if they're watching and they're reading along. A lot of kids did, if they have the book in front of them, they do read along while it's happening. So that's another thing that I gotta check with this, because we don't have the movie, right?
The movie's on
Hulu.
You can borrow one.
I'm gonna get a Hulu anyway, because I am going to cut the cord this week. Cable, let's reapply that money to getting better stuff that I want. And that
Yeah.
includes Hulu.
Haley has the. That's a stupid name, but it's like where you can choose, it's kind of Roku style, but you can choose which channels that you want to.
Sling or something?
Sling.
Okay.
But yeah, we borrow off of my mom's cable.
Yeah.
So I like do individual apps for channels. But really like PBS is free
Mhm.
and.
This is the other part, is I've got to check out one of those indoor antennas they have now, supposedly okay, so that I can get.
Oh, yeah, we got one and it was really bad.
Was it?
I'm sure he got the cheapest one.
I read some reviews before I go buy one, but
Well, yeah, I mean, like invest, because
yeah,
the one that he grabbed from Amazon,
oh no.
well, like, it was maybe just more trouble than it's worth. And we never got channel 7. And even if you have like the basic, if we have the basic package that like, we would get those 36 channels.
Yeah.
So, and my brother got us an Apple TV, so we, with that basic stuff that we can watch NBC, ABC.
Yeah.
Some
Yeah,
of you
that's,
say, I don't
that's
know,
basically all we
live.
want. We have an Apple TV, and, between that and Netflix, and if I can buy a subscription to the 2 shows that we watch that's not covered, or those other things, and add HBO when we want it, and
Well, and Hulu does like, you can add the subscription for HBO and you can add the subscription for Showtime. It's
so,
a no-brainer.
okay. But if I don't have Hulu yet, at that time, then I will take you up on sharing your.
Anytime.
Thank you.
See ya.
Oh, are you done looking at that thing? The
Okay.
calendar thing, because, or did you want to change when you're doing Gatsby? Are you still gonna start with Gatsby? It just needs to go back up on the wall under the current one that's up there.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing, Michael, I may just do like select Gatsby scenes, like not read the entire thing. So.
Oh, good, okay, perfect.
My problem is, I have to do a headshot.
Mm.
Ooh, do a headshot.
You should take yourself. Is there,
Performance quality, my love.
If, so I have a picture that's kind of good, but it's like of me like looking to the side. You can't
Yeah,
have
no, that's fine.
like this kind of thing.
Yeah, like it's probably going to be like it goes in the program. So it's like
Fine though, right? Like you don't have to be looking straight at the camera.
probably everybody else will be.
If I'm not, is that all right?
Yeah. It's not like they're nixing you from the competition.
Okay, thank you so much.